Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live stream, whether you're watching this on YouTube or on Rumble. And I'm happy to be with you today by myself. Not that I don't like having guests on this show, but I miss being myself and trying to explain my own thoughts to you guys about what is going on in the region, especially in the Middle East. We will also wait for our moderators to join, and I will welcome them when they are there. But before I go in depth into what is going on in the region and whether or not there is going to be war against Iran and those who are behind this war, I would like to tell you a short story. In 2003, between 2002 and 2003, when the United States prepared for war against Iraq back in the day, I was very young. Let's say, I think I was 15 years old or so. And back in the day, I remember very well, we went to demonstrations and protests in Aleppo, Syria. There were hundreds of thousands of people protesting, not only in Syria, but all around the world. I've seen on TV outlets millions of people going to demonstrate and protest against the war. But all these voices, including in the United States, were not heard. And the war happened and the occupation happened. This was illegal under international law. And they have basically captured, occupied, destroyed Iraq in the discourse of this war, which later prolonged for another 10, 15 years. This has led to the killing of hundreds of thousands of Iraqis, mass exodus of people from Iraq. Refugees fled to all around the world, and Iraq has been emptied from its Christians. And I remember very well when Baghdad has fallen in the hands of the Americans and the Brits. And as I mentioned, I was very young. I was, I think, 15 years old. I think so. Yeah, 15, 16. And I felt very sad. I felt very sad and I cried about it. I don't know why the emotions were very high. I wasn't so conscious, let's say, about everything that was ongoing back in the day in the region. But deep inside, this has left, let's say, deep wound in me. And I tried so hard to always try to draw parallels later between the Iraq war and the Syria war in my arguments and my commentaries, posts, analyses, not only for you guys, but also for many, many Syrian people who used to follow me on Facebook back in the day when I used to write in Arabic. And this was all based on a lie. The war was based on a lie. You remember very well this very famous photo of the former Secretary of State of the United States, Colin Powell, bringing his so-called sample to a UN Security Council meeting, lying to our faces, knowing that he lied. He confessed this later. He knew he was lying. And he lied to billions of people around the world and in order to try to sell this war. And this war, as I mentioned, led to the killing of hundreds of thousands of people based on a big, fat lie. Nowadays, similar lie is being circulated, lies, let's say, circulated against Iran. And we have seen in the past at least 2 years the preparations for war against Iran, basically by trying to hit its allies first in Lebanon, Gaza, Syria, Yemen. And it looks like Israel thinks that this is a detrimental war, and rightly so. And they want to create a region which is completely dominated by what they call the Pax Judaica. I'm not an expert in this matter. I would like to host probably Professor Chiang to explain to us what is Pax Judaica. But this is the terminology nowadays used that, in simple terms, the Zionist state of Israel is trying to replace the US-led hegemon in the region, especially in the Middle East, via a Pax Judaica alliance. Now, under this alliance, they're trying to create a region that is completely dominated by Israel, and the rest of the people are subjugated. And this is a pre-phase for the creation of what is called the Greater Israel Project. And the Greater Israel Project extends from the Niles in Egypt all the way to the Euphrates in Syria. And this is not a fantasy. This is not some sort of a conspiracy theory. If you watched the interview of Mike Huckabee with Tucker Carlson pressed him many, many times and asked him the important question. He asked him if, and this is, we're going to discuss this at the end of today's stream, guys, so stay tuned for that. He asked Mike Huckabee, okay, where does this right come from? The right of the Jewish people having the legal right to settle and live on Palestinian territories, right? So they're talking about some of the Genesis, and in this Genesis, it is promised from God for the Jewish people to have the land of between the Euphrates and the Nile. And Tucker Carlson came back with another question, asked him, so are you okay with that? And he was okay, basically. Mike Huckabee is okay, who is the ambassador of the United States to Israel, for Israel to occupy large swaths of territories extending from Egypt to Palestine, to Lebanon, to Syria, and also parts of Jordan and Saudi Arabia. Eventually, some of these Arabic countries made a statement condemning Mike Huckabee's statements. Of course, they will not do anything about it. They will just make a statement and condemn. Other than that, they will just continue their collaboration with the United States and Israel in the region. That's the sad reality that we are living in at the current moment. Now, during the discourse of these events, Donald Trump, yesterday, he gave a speech, and in the speech, he literally repeated the same talking points of the Iraq war. And during his speech, he said that Iran is building missiles that will soon reach the United States of America, adding, I will never allow the world's #1 sponsor of terror to have a nuclear weapons.
Some terrible people. They've already developed missiles that can threaten Europe and our bases overseas, and they're working to build missiles that will soon reach the United States of America. After midnight hammer.
Please listen to the terminologies first. First, he says those are very terrible people. So first of all, you deprive them from their, goodwill, and these people are just terrible people. They're evil people. So you paint them in an evil picture. Secondly, they're threatening our allies in Europe as if he cares about them. He's the one who is waging financial or trade war. He wants to take over the Greenland, basically, from the Europeans. In any ways, he's trying to bring this argument that also Iran is somehow threatening the Europeans, which never happened, by the way. And Iranians are not suicidal, basically, to threaten the Europeans. But let's continue.
They were warned to make no future attempts to rebuild their weapons program, in particular, nuclear weapons. Yet they continue, starting it all over. We wiped it out, and they want to start all over again.
So let's focus on this, because this is very important, right? The United States, in this last 12-day war, allegedly destroyed their nuclear program. Let's suppose everything he said is correct. And now they want to restart their nuclear program. Do you guys know that it took Iran over 30 years to build a nuclear program? So what is he talking about? Let's suppose he's correct, which is not correct. He is a liar. Donald Trump is a liar. He destroyed the nuclear facilities. So he sent Iran 30 years back in time. So why would they now go to another war against Iran? Meanwhile, they are encircling Iran from all sides, and they're monitoring everything that is coming in and coming out. And under this pretext, he says, they are going to develop it again. Okay, if they're going to develop it again, will it not take them another nuclear program, another 10 years, 20 years at least, to have a functional nuclear program? And shouldn't Iran enrich uranium to a certain level in order to be able to develop nukes? At the current moment, the truth of the matter is that the Americans couldn't destroy all the facilities of Iran's nuclear program. And Iran has highly enriched uranium hidden somewhere under the ground or under the mountains. And they have the threshold to build a nuke if they come under a nuclear attack or an existential threat. And this is the trick in the Iranian strategy, and that is we will keep the threshold for ourselves. We will not develop nukes. We don't want them as long as you don't nuke us or you do not pose an existential threat against us. Remember, even during the 12-day war, none of the senior security or military officials or in the, let's say, people around the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, said anything about changing the doctrine of Iran's nuclear program, because this war was not existential for them, and Israel didn't use a nuke against Iran. But if Israel uses a nuke against Iran or poses as an existential threat, Iran wants to have the weapon which they could deter them first from attacking them. So the trick here is not having the nuke itself, but the capacity to have the nuke if I'm attacked. So this is, again, a deterrence capacity, not to the extent of having a nuclear weapon, but the moment you have the capacity to develop nukes, then you are deterring your enemy by telling him, if you nuke me or if you pose an existential threat, then I could build a nuke. So that's the strategy of the Iranians in this regard. Let's continue with Donald Trump first.
And are at this moment again pursuing their sinister ambitions. We are in negotiations with them. They want to make a deal, but we haven't heard those secret words. We will never have a nuclear weapon.
Well, that's another lie, because Iran has signed the JCPOA in 2015, and they have decreased the nuclear enrichment cap, and they were in no capacity to develop nukes, even if they came under attack. And back in the day, Obama lifted some of the sanctions, and there were better diplomatic relations between the US and Iran. And despite that, Donald Trump came and he basically torn the agreement apart. And now he wants them to, once again, to commit to not developing nukes. Meanwhile, the Iranian officials are saying, we are flexible. We want to reach to an agreement with you, and we're flexible with our nuclear program to the extent that we could go back to the JCPOA level of enrichment, which means we cannot develop nuke, even if we want to, but you have to give us security guarantees that this type of attacks won't happen against us. But the reason Donald Trump is saying all these things is not because he is convinced of it, because he's persuaded and pressed and lobbied by the Israel lobby. And that's the important point in this regard.
My preference
Every single one of them who is standing here and basically applauding Donald Trump will be considered partners in a big crime if they wage this war against
My
Iran.
preference is to solve this problem through diplomacy. But one thing is certain, I will never allow the world's #1 sponsor of terror, which they are by far, to have a nuclear weapon. Can't let that happen.
Do you know who is the #1 state sponsor of terrorism in the world? The name of the country is 3 letters. USA. USA. That's the biggest sponsor of terrorism in the world. And including in my country, Syria, they have been supporting Takfiri, Islamist, terrorist, extremists for over 15 years, to the extent that he, Donald Trump, bragged about appointing and selecting and putting the former Al-Qaeda emir as president of Syria. masquerading as the president of the country. He said that. Nobody can claim otherwise. It's really strange times. Unfortunately, we live at times where people like Donald Trump and his administration officials and the people also in the Democratic Party don't be fooled into the thinking that this is somehow a Republican war against Iran. No, this is the US deep state. Those are the people above Donald Trump. Those are the people, this is the empire above Epstein. Those are the people who Donald Trump can't say no to them, right? And they're pressing him so hard. In my opinion, if he had basically a free will and he is really America first, he knows that this war makes no sense for the Americans, for the American national security, for the American assets in West Asia, Middle East, including in the Gulf monarchies. It makes no sense for the trade routes, for the energy routes, for the Strait of Hormuz. Lots of things that could happen in the region, and these fires of the war could spread all over the region. And this is not some sort of a threat. This is a very realistic scenario that could happen if there is an all-out war against Iran. And basically lying about it in order to sell this war, it just reminds us of the Iraq war. It's the same script, same WMD script. Nowadays, they are talking about Iran developing nukes and Iran developing intercontinental missiles. This is completely BS. The Iranians do not even have the capability and the technology and even the program to develop ICBMs. Iran doesn't have intercontinental missile program. So remember what Netanyahu did in this regard after Donald Trump bombed some of the nuclear facilities in Iran and said, we're done. We finished on the nuclear program of Iran. Then Netanyahu said, he knows it's a lie. They couldn't destroy the nuclear program. So he came with another lie, another excuse. He started saying, yes, but Iran is developing ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missile, and that could reach to the United States. Do you guys know how far the United States is from Iran? So he has to come with an excuse to say, look, they're developing 8,000 kilometer long missiles, and this could reach the United States. You could add 3,000 kilometer above it, and then they could reach the United States. But guys, this is not like developing pens. 3,000 kilometer extra range on a missile needs years and years and years of development and research and expertise and materials and testing and assistance from countries like Russia and China or North Korea and movement of equipments into Iran. So imagine they're selling us a big blatant lie without even showing us the most basic evidence. If this is true, if Iran is developing ICBMs, then we will know from the testing, we will know from the equipment coming, we will know from the assistance they are receiving from regional or international powers to build this kind of weapons, right? But rest assured, even the Russians, the Chinese, nobody wants to give Iran this type of hardware and technology, even if Iranians asked for. And the Iranians aren't asking for it because they have no interest in having intercontinental ballistic missile, because Iran wants its influence to be untouched in this region, in West Asia. Iran is a regional power and not an international power. Iran doesn't want to threaten the United States. Iran wants to protect itself from American attacks in the region. Therefore, they need a deterrence capacity in the region, in the imminent threats that they are receiving from the region. And those attacks or those threats are coming from the region, are basically coming from the American bases distributed all around the region. It's not a really, guys, rocket science, right? Luis, post the link of what you just said, and I will check it. I don't think that's true. So now the CIA is going after the Iranians, and they want to recruit Iranians on their rank. So this is another absurd thing. They have posted this on their X account. So basically, the CIA published a plea to potential informants in Iran with guidance on how to securely contact the organization as tensions between Washington and Tehran approach a critical juncture. The 2-minute video published Tuesday provided detailed technical instructions for establishing contact, recommending the use of virtual private networks like VPNs and Tor networks, while advising against using business computers or office phones. The Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, can hear your voice and wants to help you, the agency said in the Farsi language message, which appeared on X, Instagram, and YouTube. The recruitment drive comes amid a significant U.S. military buildup in the Middle East, including the deployment of 2 aircraft carrier strike groups and additional aerial assets in recent weeks. U.S. President Donald Trump has issued a series of warnings to Tehran, stating on Monday that Iran would face a very bad day unless it agrees to his terms of a deal regarding its nuclear program. Indirect nuclear talks between Washington and Tehran, mediated by Oman, are scheduled to resume in Geneva on Tuesday. Tuesday is next Tuesday. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has described the nuclear agreement as within reach, while insisting that Tehran's missile program remains a red line and strictly non-negotiable. Iran maintains its nuclear activities are purely civilian. So the U.S. spy agency, the CIA, has repeatedly targeted other nations with similar campaigns in the past, releasing pleas in Mandarin, Korean, and Russian. Beijing condemned the Chinese language recruitment videos when they appeared in May 2025 as a political provocation. China's foreign ministry pledged to take all measures necessary to resolutely push back infiltration and sabotage activities from overseas. Well, that's some strange way of recruiting people. So I'm waiting for, I can't hear anything reloading. What is it? So, Luis, you claimed that Iran has tested 10,000 kilometer long missile. I want you to post. Okay, you posted the link, but it didn't show up. From which website is it? Just name the website in the live chat and I will check it myself now. I don't think this is true. So I will move with you guys to a very important article, which I have been reading today. I will just check this website very quickly. So we have it here. Okay, not this one, this one. So this article is written via a friend. If you want me to have him on the show, guys, please let me know. This is a friend who published this article in the Responsible Statecraft, and his name is Sajjad Safi'i, and his article is very important. I want to ask you something. This article is called "What If Today's Iran is Resigned to a Long, Hellish War with the United States?" I would like to ask you, my friends, do you mind if I play this article for you? I think it's a nice way also to listen to the article. I think it's a, I don't know, it's just 3 minutes. Let's take a listen.
Far less favorable to the.
So we have to go back here. We have to maybe refresh it also. Yeah, I think so. So we can start from the beginning. So this is just a 3-minute, guys. Listen.
What if today's Iran is resigned to a long, hellish war with the U.S.? Tehran learned from the June attack, and its comparative advantage now is to drag Washington into a protracted regional conflict. Trump's decision in June 2025 to bomb Iran's nuclear facilities in the final days of Israel's war on Iran removed any lingering doubts about his administration's willingness to cross the long-standing U.S. red line of directly attacking Iran's nuclear program. As a result, every subsequent American military threat, against Iran as well as the rest of the world, was imbued with a credibility that only the precedent of naked aggression can impose. The U.S. military's abduction of Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro in January only reinforced that credibility. But the U.S. strike on Iran, or Operation Midnight Hammer, has also set in motion 2 consequences that run directly counter to his vision of coercing Iran into submission. First, the brief U.S.-Iran dust-up following Operation Midnight Hammer communicated to Iran that while Washington was now more likely to pull the trigger, it was by no means eager to enter a costly and open-ended firefight. Indeed, it did not escape the attention of the Iranians that while the Trump administration warned Tehran that any Iranian response to Operation Midnight Hammer would trigger a devastating U.S. response, Iran's ballistic missile retaliation against U.S. bases in Qatar elicited not Trump's wrath but his framing of the episode as an opportunity to move toward peace and harmony. This was then promptly followed by his brokering of a ceasefire between Iran and Israel. Second, The joint US-Israeli war on Iran in June liberated Iran from its own fear of total war. In the months and years leading up to the 12-day war, Tehran's intoxicating belief that war could and should be avoided, at every turn and at any cost, had infused the Iranian decision-making apparatus with a paralyzing caution that, on the one hand, deterred Iran from retaliating decisively against Israeli attacks while at the same time emboldened Israel to repeatedly push the limits of escalation with impunity. But that edifice of fear would collapse under the weight of Israel's war on Iran in June 2025, and the United States' direct participation in that war. In its place emerged a sober recognition that Iran was no longer standing on the brink of a war it could prevent, but was already fully immersed in a recurring cycle of limited Israeli and American wars inside Iranian territory. Iran's generals understood that the only reliable way to conclusively break that cycle was to drive the confrontation beyond Washington's comfortable terrain of swift, manageable military interventions and into a realm where the costs of continued escalation would become unbearable for the United States and Israel alike. In the recent warning of Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, if they start a war this time, he cautioned, it will be a regional war. For Washington, this shift in Iranian consciousness could not have occurred at a worse moment in time. Iran has been thrust into a state of full mobilization for a regional war at the very moment when it has become unmistakably clear that Washington's appetite for military adventures does not extend beyond spectacular, swift, and high-impact demonstrations of military dominance. The suggestion here is by no means that the Iranian armed forces are somehow on par with, let alone superior to, those of the U.S. military. Rather, an acute asymmetry has emerged in the two sides' resolve and pain tolerance, an asymmetry in which, paradoxically, the militarily weaker party is structurally less constrained in its willingness to both endure and impose costs, resulting in a strategic posture far less favorable to the U.S. than the raw balance of military power would suggest. More paradoxical, still, is that this sharp imbalance in resolve has crystallized at precisely the moment when Iran's overall regional position is far more precarious than at any point in recent decades, a precarity made possible by the collapse of Assad's rule in Syria and the significant weakening of Hezbollah's operational depth in southern Lebanon. This asymmetry in resolve has found political expression in the recent resumption of talks between Iran and the United States over the nuclear program, assuming, of course, that the current negotiations reflect a sincere U.S. effort to reach an agreement and not, as was the case during last year's negotiations, an attempt merely to lull the Iranians into complacency ahead of war. The talks are not, as is often claimed, evidence of U.S. success in coercing Iran to come to the negotiating table. Instead, the talks reflect a growing realization within the Trump administration that Washington's options are limited: either climb to the next and final rung of the escalation ladder, which is a full-scale war with Iran, whose duration and intensity would likely escape U.S. control, or return to a negotiated settlement of the nuclear dispute. Should current talks result in a resolution of the nuclear file, they will stand as yet another outward expression of the realization in Washington that a total war with Iran is a monstrous black box the United States has no desire to open. For if Trump truly believed the U.S. could win militarily against Iran in the timeframe, shape, and intensity of his choosing, he would already have started this war, just as he did in the operation to abduct Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro. What has prevented him from doing so, more than anything else, is Iran's very real and sizable capacity to drag the United States and the entire region into a grinding, drawn-out war of attrition that would further accelerate the decline of U.S. global hegemony in ways previously thought unimaginable. To be sure, the current impasse offers precious little by way of novelty. On the contrary, almost all of its defining features were either knowable or predictable before Trump's withdrawal from the JCPOA. Indeed, President Obama's pursuit of nuclear diplomacy was driven chiefly by the same military realities that have until today prompted Trump to pursue diplomacy with Iran. 9 years after Trump first set out to overwrite the legacy of Obama's deal, the paths available to Washington are clearer than at any point since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. A total regional war whose limits would not be set by Washington, or a nuclear settlement that, while not perfect from Trump's standpoint, would pull the United States back from the brink of an open-ended and intractable regional war within Iran. If Washington's participation in Israel's June 2025 war with Iran elevated U.S. military force to a perfectly viable instrument of the United States-Iran policy, the success of current talks would signal the formal undoing of that logic. But should the failure of talks pave the way for another full-scale war, the United States and Israel will be fighting an Iran vastly different from June. For the Iran of today appears to have made its peace with the grim conclusion that while a decisive slog with Israel and the United States is sure to be agonizing, it is preferable to the recurring attrition of repeated wars and a chronic strategic vulnerability that only emboldens adversaries to target Iran and its regional allies. This cold calculus is captured with unsettling clarity in an oft-quoted Iranian proverb: Marg yek bar, Shivan yek bar, death once, wail once.
So, Sorry that I had to play this article, and I don't think that I should play it on on the fast pace. Some people were asking it because you cannot hear anything when you put it on 2 times faster or even 1.5 times faster. And I was doing some research now, and these reports about Iran testing ICBM is coming from, as you said, from WION. This is an Indian website. And it is from January 2026. So this is not a coincidence that is coming now when the US wants to attack them. And there is no any reliable verification about this. Even Western intelligence and independent analysts remain skeptical about this, noting that a full ICBM test requires verified multi-stage separation, atmospheric re-entry, and precision guidance, and at extreme distances, none of which have been confirmed by outside sources. So this is completely BS, guys. And the second source is, of course, Iran International, which is funded by which is based in Britain and funded by Saudi Arabia. So all these things, guys, please be careful when you read these type of reports. Iran's maximum range missile, which they have officially, is 2,000 kilometer. And had they had a 10,000 kilometer long ICBM, they would have come under attack long time ago. So that doesn't exist. And there is Russia would have allegedly, but who said Russia didn't even confirm that they have done this test? You are bringing a report from an Indian website, and you say that Iranians have successfully tested ICBM in cooperation with Russia, but the Russians are denying this. Iranians are denying this, and the source is Iran International and the Indian WION. Those are not even reliable sources, my friend. I don't know why you are debating it, because that's not the case. Sorry, that's completely BS. So if you guys want me to have Sajjad on the show, please let me know in the comments below. He's a friend of mine. He is in Berlin, and I could definitely have a discussion with him about his article and what he thinks about this potential war against Iran. Well, knowing that he is a progressive, liberal person in his life, you can see like his lifestyle. He has nothing to do with, like, he's not living an Islamic life, let's say, or a conservative life, or a type of life that aligns with the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei's ideals in terms of his social life, for example, right? Like, there's so many Iranians I'm meeting also recently who are not like loyalists to the Islamic revolution or to Ali Khamenei, but at the same time, they're patriotic enough to understand that this war is not about Ali Khamenei, and this war is not about the Islamic revolution itself, but rather Iran. So I'm happy also to meet this type of people that they have lots of criticism and reservations about the Iranian system itself inside Iran, but at the same time, they don't want to sell out themselves, and they don't want to become like a knife in the back of their own nation. And they have learned from the experiences of the past, from Iraq, from Syria, from Lebanon, from other places, and they know that the United States and Israel do not have the interests of their own people at heart. Therefore, they reject this Israeli-American-led campaign against their country, well knowing that this type of war will lead into the destruction of their own country. So that's why I respect these people even more, because personally, I never considered myself a loyalist to the Assad regime. Always criticized them when they failed and when they made mistakes, especially in the domestic affairs. People, because do not read Arabic and what I used to write on Facebook, for example, and they think like I'm like some sort of a loyalist and Assadist. You remember those accusations back in the day. But I supported Syria's sovereignty, Syria's national integrity, and its right to have its own national dialogue and its own approach in building a foreign policy that aligns with the interests of the Syrian people. I don't understand why would we basically come and destroy our whole country basically, which happened now, as you can see in Syria, to appease the Americans and the Israelis because they don't like the political system there. Sorry, screw them. This is not their job, and this is not their country, and we don't want to take any lectures from them, especially that the Americans and the Israelis have now a long track record in human rights violations, including now what we have seen in the Gaza Strip. After the Gaza Strip, they have no moral ground to lecture and teach the people anything about anything, especially in the Middle East. So I think that's a statement that we have to make about this, that we do not believe in the American promises that they are here to free us and to liberate us. Now, there is of course a very clear Israeli-led campaign on social media platforms. They're asking the people, the talking heads, especially those podcasters in the United States, those who are, let's say, their interests align with the Israeli interests, to come up financially, of course, and also career-wise, to come up and make statements and say, no, but this one in Iran is different from Iraq. And one of them is, of course, none other than Sam Harris. Sam Harris says, Iran is not Iraq or Afghanistan. Let's take a look.
I honestly think Iran is much less likely to blow back on us the way Iraq and Afghanistan did. I just think a majority of the people are in a different spot with their desperation to be rid of theocracy. Right, it's a much more sophisticated culture that has been oppressed for now more than a generation. You can't say that about Afghanistan, right? You can't even say that about Iraq, and Iraq was more sophisticated than Afghanistan. I do think it's a different situation. It's like, if you're going to talk about the prospect of nation building, is probably, ironically, this is probably a good opportunity that we can't possibly take, given how bad our experience was previously. But I think it's worth assuming that the majority of the Iranian people want something like a secular democracy, or something, something that would be recognizably secular and democratic. I honestly think.
I honestly don't understand what does he want from us, except he's selling a war, and he's doing a word salad basically, and he assumes that the majority of the Iranian people are against their government, and probably the majority of the Iranian people do not want an Islamic rule, probably, but that doesn't mean that the majority of the Iranian people are willing to cooperate and collaborate with enemy countries under what they see as an enemy country in order to free themselves from the Islamic system. They don't see that way. Iranians are, he said, they are smarter and more advanced or more developed, something like that, than Iraq or in Afghanistan. If that is the case, probably they also know that you guys are pushing them on the cliff and you want to destroy their country. That's probably the case. And many people, by the way, if you go to just check the comments and the posts seriously. Sam Harris wants you to know Iran won't be like those other disastrous wars he advocated for, because God gave him a vision and will always bless those who stand with Israel. The quote posts are amazing. Very funny. He just leads with the meme. I advised a number of couples to explore an open relationship. Did it work for those people? No, it never does. But it might work for us. The man who told you that God doesn't exist because you can't see him through a telescope has thoughts. Our friend Mel says, everything he says here is just hogwash. If the majority of people in Iran were truly done with theocracy, then the regime would fall overnight. If 45 million Iranians were truly done, there would be nothing the government could do to stop from falling. Hell, if 4.5 million people were truly done, there is very little the mullahs could do to maintain power. 4.5 million people could bring the whole country to a standstill. But the fact is, it is likely less than 250,000 Iranians who are truly done with their government, to the point that they would welcome a foreign power bombing the government and country into submission. Sam Harris is a depraved supremacist who supports and advocates for the interests of Israel above all else. He doesn't give a shit about Iranians or Americans or anyone else. No one should ever take anything the S says seriously. Please, just one more regime change war in the Middle East. Please, bro, I swear they will welcome us as liberator this time. Come on, bro. This time, of course, will be different. The target population is sophisticated enough to appreciate being bombed into freedom. The people are really funny. Don't you like the internet, guys? Sam Harris continues his stack of being absolutely fucking wrong about everything always. And I say, Americans, your problem isn't Iran. Your problem is the war salesman at home. Sam Harris types and the entire word salad class, packaging another disaster as an opportunity. Yeah. So if you're an American, guys, please be aware of these people. These people are trying to drag you into another disastrous war in the region, and you know, and I know, and everybody knows who is behind it. And this reminded me of a very famous video by the former CIA analyst Philip Giraldi, and this is a long time ago, right? I think this is from 2014. Yeah. So in 2014, imagine this is 12 years ago, almost. He said, if the US goes to war with Iran, it won't be because Iran is a threat, it will be because Israel and its lobby.
Sure, you've all heard the expression that a friend does not let a friend drive drunk. Well, the United States has been driving drunk for quite some time, and that dangerous behavior has to some extent been encouraged by Israel and its many supporters in Washington. I also would not doubt that Israel, accustomed to behaving with impunity towards its alleged friend and patron in Washington, might manufacture a pretext to draw the U.S. into a new conflict. If the United States goes to war with Iran in the near future, it will not be because Tehran actually threatens America. It will be because Israel and its powerful lobby in the U.S. have succeeded in creating an essentially false casus belli to mandate such action. While it is often observed that everyone spies on everyone else, particularly true if one is referring to our own NSA, espionage is a high-risk business that most countries are extremely careful when they are spying on friends because of fear of blowback. Israel, which relies on Washington for billions of dollars in aid and also for political cover in international fora like the UN, does not spy discreetly, largely because it knows that few in Washington will seek to hold it to account. Israel, where government and business work hand in hand, has obtained significant advantage by systematically stealing American technology with both military and civilian applications. The U.S. developed technology is then reversed engineered and used by the Israelis to support their own exports.
Wow.
The GAO concluded that Israel conducts, and this is a quote, conducts the most aggressive espionage operation against the United States of any U.S. ally.
Wow.
So the answer to the question, is Israel an ally of the United States, is most definitely no. Is it even a friend? Well, I suppose there are all kinds of friends in the world, but if you judge...
Well, Ben Shapiro said, guys, that Israel stopped spying on the United States. I think he said like in 1988. Since 1988, Israel has never spied on the United States. So if you believe that, of course, we have lots of bridges here to be sold. And Philip is, of course, a brilliant person. And I have tried to invite him several times. He's an old man. And I'm not saying this as a derogatory word. You know, the guy, I think he's like late 80s, early 90s. He's an old man. He's going sometimes to very particular shows. I don't think he wants to come to be like this, you know, normalized on all YouTube channels. He's just going probably to his friend shows. And I would love to speak with him. Of course, I wanted to speak with him also about Syria, about Iran. Unfortunately, I was not successful in inviting him to the show. But this is, guys, a very important statement by him. And this goes in line with this recent discussion between Tucker Carlson and the U.S. ambassador to Israel, Huckabee, who basically... did you guys watch this conversation between Tucker and Huckabee? I did. I watched the 2 hours. I think it was 2 hours, right? Around 2.5 hours. It just felt like he's an Israeli official and not an American official, just being honest with you. And this is a conversation between them about whose war is this and who wants this war against Iran.
Bibi Netanyahu does not want a war with...
Imagine the type of lie you have to say and the audacity you should have and the way that you have to say with a straight face to claim that Netanyahu doesn't want a war with Iran.
Bibi Netanyahu does not want a war with Iran.
I don't want to be arguing. Good guy. Excellent.
He's a good guy.
He and maybe Jared too are involved in a negotiation with Iran, and the Israeli government short circuits it by hitting Iran. So like
what do you mean they short circuited by hitting Iran?
They did everything they could to shut down the negotiations between the United States, the Trump administration, and Iran. They're acting in their own interest, but our country...
Well, you remember the 12-day war? The Americans and the Iranians were negotiating. Like they were in the middle of talks when Israel waged an attack, a unilateral attack against the Iranians, and then forced Donald Trump to intervene in the last day and claim to destroy the nuclear facilities in Iran, just a one-time bombing of Iran, in order to stop the war there because they didn't want to have a regional war. That's the truth. That is the truth. And now we have more forces moving to the region because there is a possible scenario that Iran could start another war against Iran unilaterally, but this time it could go out of hands and it can lead into a regional war, and the United States has also to protect its assets in the region, right? So there is also two theories. One theory is that the United States is in bed with the Israelis to strike Iran, and other people in the United States say that Americans are worried, or the Trump administration is worried, that Israel may start a war against Iran, and this would lead into a regional war, and they have to protect their assets. So they have all these forces in the region with hope that Iran would compromise and would like surrender, basically, without war happening. And that's not going to happen. Iran will not surrender. Iran will not give up on its deterrence capacity. If they do, it's a suicide for them. So I'm sure that they're not going to do that. So the alternative or the other option is war. And Israelis want war, Netanyahu wants war, and in my opinion, the empire above Epstein wants this war against Iran. So I don't think, even if Trump says no or he doesn't want, I don't think that he can stop this war. And rest assured that after what we saw in the Gaza Strip, I don't doubt for a second that Israel could use nuclear weapons against Iran. If they feel and if they see that they're not winning this war and they are receiving huge blows and huge retaliation against them, I don't think that they will rule out the possibility of nuking Iran. That's what I think. Now, guys, there is an issue that is very correlated, by the way, with Iran. And this week, by the way, before I move that, I would just like to thank all the people who joined recently to this stream. I would really appreciate it, guys, if you simply hit the like button, thumbs up as you're watching this stream. It would really help this stream and help this channel, and subscribe to Syriana Analysis. Thank you so much. So another very important issue that is correlated to the Iran issue is this new report, basically, by the Wall Street Journal. And this is basically an exclusive report by the Wall Street Journal or they claim U.S. intelligence says at least 15,000 at large after ISIS detention camp collapses in Syria. So they say U.S. intelligence agencies have concluded that 15 to 20,000 people, including Islamic State affiliates, are now at large in Syria after an exodus from a camp that held jihadist families. U.S. officials familiar with the matter estimate. So I have written an article about this, and I think it's important to share this with you. By the way, I'm sharing one opinion article on Substack per week, like at least every 5 days or so, let's say. So every 10 days, 2 articles, almost. I don't have more time, like every 5 days, 1 article. I think it's enough. If you're on Substack, guys, please search for me, Kevork Almassian, like the way my name is written on the screen, and follow me there. I have now 2,000 followers on Substack, and I'm loving I have more ways to express my opinions in a written way than in a, how to say, compared to podcasts or talking to you. Also, you have more time to organize the article, the arguments, and change them, edit them, the style and the tone, and lots of things. So, guys, in my Substack article, the article is the empires recycled ISIS in Syria. So this is the article. I would like to share it with you. The empires recycled ISIS in Syria. Why the ISIS comeback story hides a strategic transition in Syria. When the headlines tell you, guys, that ISIS is resurfacing in Syria, that prison breaks are accelerating, and that American forces are withdrawing, You're supposed to read it as a chaotic but ultimately familiar story. Terrorism comes back, the international community reacts, and the US reluctantly adjusts its posture to keep the region safe. But if you have followed Syria closely, you recognize something else. The timing is too synchronized. The incentives are too clear, and the outcomes are too useful for the very actors who claim they are trying to prevent them. What is happening now is a strategic transition. And like most strategic transitions in our region, it is being sold to the public with a language that doesn't match the mechanics on the ground. For many years, Syrians and many of us who warned about this kept saying the same thing. You cannot warehouse thousands of ISIS-linked detainees in improvised prisons under proxy management without a political settlement, without serious trials, without repatriations, and without a durable security architecture, and then pretend this won't explode in your face. The Americans allegedly managed those prisons through their proxy structure in the Northeast. This was by the SDF, right? But they were never serious about solving the ISIS problem in Syria as a problem of social reintegration, de-radicalization, and justice. They treated it as leverage, something you keep on ice, something you can throw when you need pressure, something you can point to when you need a justification for a base, a convoy, a new airstrike, or a new mission. This is, by the way, not a radical claim. It is at this point a pattern, and the most disturbing part about the Epstein email revelation is that they match what has long been said from the Syrian side. In one widely circulated email attributed to Jeffrey Epstein, he describes the US giving ISIS a pass to advance on Palmyra. And that aligns uncomfortably with an old, now infamous point that John Kerry was recorded making, that US officials watched ISIS expand and believed it could be used as leverage against the former President Bashar Assad. Now, in order for me, because sources and is everything and credibility is everything, I have to show you this. This is the email of Jeffrey Epstein, which I'm talking about. And this is here. Jeffrey Epstein, basically, he's sending to Tom Pritzker an email in September 2016. And this is what he says. Turkey gives al-Nusra a heads up on Iraqi recruits, slaughter. Russia gives Erdogan a heads up on coup. The US gives a pass on ISIS to Palmyra. Assad has no support, so will stay. So this is the email of Jeffrey Epstein claiming that the US has given ISIS a pass to move to Palmyra. And this goes perfectly in line with this video, or with this recording of John Kerry, the former Secretary of State of the United States. And this was in, I believe, October, September 2015. And he was secretly saying the following.
The reason Russia came in is because ISIL was getting stronger. Daesh was threatening the possibility of going to Damascus and so forth. And that's why Russia came in, because they didn't want a Daesh government. And they supported Assad. And
we knew that this was growing.
We know that this was growing. We were watching.
We were watching.
We saw that Daesh was growing in strength.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought Assad was threatened.
And we thought Assad was threatened, by the way, the word is there.
We thought, however, we could probably manage. That Assad might then negotiate. Instead of negotiating, you got Assad. Now you got Putin to support.
So basically, the United States was watching the expansion of ISIS, and they let them go to Palmyra, and from Palmyra later to Damascus, because they thought, it's a threat against Assad, and now Assad could compromise, right? But instead of compromising, he had Putin on his side. This is according to the former Secretary of State. Then he was the Secretary of State, John Kerry, when he met with so-called Syrian opposition figures back in the day in Washington, D.C. So this is perfectly, so we have Jeffrey Epstein email here. saying that the US gave pass on ISIS to Palmyra, and then we have John Kerry basically saying that they were watching the expansion of ISIS and they saw it as an opportunity to exert pressure on Assad. So as you can see, guys, the strategic logic is undeniable, right? ISIS was not treated primarily as an enemy to be eradicated. It was treated as a pressure instrument to be managed. Then the map shifted. Western intelligence services and their regional allied networks finally got what they had been trying to engineer for many years. Assad was removed, the Syrian state was hollowed out, and now we arrive at the heart of the danger. Syria is being repackaged for the world under a new ruler who, not long ago, was known as an Al-Qaeda emir and is now being presented with a straight face as the country's president. Abu Muhammad al-Jolani struck a deal with Washington and Ankara in Paris. This was a few weeks ago, by the way, allowing him to capture large swaths of territory previously held by Kurdish-led forces, which were rapidly transferred or captured, and inside those swaths were facilities holding ISIS detainees. In the fog of transition, infighting, and security fragmentation, militants fled. Some escaped, some were moved, some simply disappeared into the terrain. So now we have a Syria where the most combustible human material on earth, trained, ideologically hardened, internationally networked militants, has been reintroduced into a country that is already exhausted, polarized, and newly governed by a coalition of forces whose own ideological history overlaps with the jihadist universe. And this produces two possible outcomes, both dangerous, both useful to outside powers. I want you guys to focus on this because I will come to a conclusion about the Greater Israel Project here. On one hand, some of these ISIS elements may find it convenient to cooperate with the new security structures in Damascus because survival often produces alliances that ideology would normally forbid. On the other hand, and arguably more dangerous, ISIS itself is already signaling the opposite direction, that Jolani has gone too far in collaboration with the United States and has been too passive toward Israel. In that scenario, the betrayal narrative becomes a recruiting tool, and disillusioned militants inside Jolani's own camp can defect to ISIS, strengthening it with experienced fighters who know the terrain, the networks, the weapon routes. This is when Syria stops being a Syrian problem and becomes a regional one again. Because a revived ISIS is not just a threat to Damascus, it is a threat to Jordan, it is a threat to Lebanon, it is a threat to Iraq, and it is a threat to minorities everywhere, Christians, Yazidis, Shia villages, and anyone outside the Takfiri worldview. And it is also crucially a convenient boogeyman. It is also a convenient boogeyman that can be used to justify escalations by Israel, which is already operating freely in Syria with a different strategic logic than Washington. Washington's preferred end state, as it is being implemented, is a unified Syria or unified regime in Syria under a single address. The new leadership that can be integrated into American regional management can claim to fight terrorism and can align Syria's posture toward the US camp. Israel's preferred end state is not a unified Syria at all. Israel wants a weaker Syria, a divided Syria, a Syria fragmented into manageable zones, a Syria that can never again function as a coherent state capable of resisting Israeli expansion or imposing costs. And if you want to understand how ISIS can become useful again, even after all this blood, you look at the way threats are instrumentalized. Mike Huckabee went on Tucker Carlson and spoke openly about the Greater Israel vision extending from the Nile to the Euphrates. Whether you treat that as ideology, fantasy, or policy aspiration, what matters is that in the real world, expansion projects require justification, and ISIS provides perfect justification, a permanent that allows occupations to be framed as. This is why I always resisted the fairy tale that ISIS is a fully independent actor. It behaves repeatedly like an entity that becomes stronger when intelligence and regional ecosystems allow it to breed, and weaker when those ecosystems decide it must be suffocated. It is terrorism, yes, but terrorism that often functions as an asset, directly or indirectly, in wider strategic games. So when the people ask, why would the US withdraw from Syria now? Because now they're withdrawing from Syria at the moment when ISIS is announcing a new phase. The answer is simple, my friends, because the US mission in Syria was never primarily counterterrorism. The mission was oil, wheat, and leverage. It was occupying oil fields and key agricultural zones to choke the former Syrian government after sanctions, especially the Caesar Act, made reconstruction and normal economic life impossible. It was holding Al Tanf, this is a border crossing between Jordan, Syria, and Iraq, by the way, to block trade routes between Syria, Jordan, and Iraq, strangling regional connectivity. And once those goals were achieved and the map was solved through a new regime in Damascus that can be sold as legitimate, Washington can relocate assets and reprioritize. And the new priority is increasingly Iran. This is the part that should make Gulf states and, frankly, everyone in the region think twice, because the removal of Syria as a functioning state and the stripping of Syria's air defenses after the takeover of Damascus have effectively opened Syria's airspace to Israeli operations, creating pathways for escalation toward eastern Syria, into Iraqi Kurdistan air corridors, and potentially toward Iran. Syria has been made toolsless, defenseless, unable to protect its skies, which is exactly what a regional escalation architecture requires. If a major confrontation with Iran erupts, the blowback will not stay in Iran. It will be rebound across the entire region. And Syria, already shattered, will become one of the easiest surfaces for that shock to crack. Meanwhile, we are told to trust the new Damascus leadership to keep security, but its own internal cohesion is questionable. Many of its fighters fought for transnational jihadism, and they were promised Jerusalem, not normalization with Israel. Once that myth collapses, factional defections become a real risk. And in that scenario, Israel can use the excuse of ISIS threats to push deeper, faster, and more decisively, because the military geography is already in its favor. I think this is the main premise of this article, and it goes in line with this recent interview of Tucker Carlson with Huckabee, basically saying that he doesn't mind Israel taking over all the territories between the Nile and the Euphrates. If they took it all, it will be fine if they took it all. From the Euphrates in Syria and Iraq to the Nile in Egypt. This is the Greater Israel Project that we have been Greater Israel Project. I'm sick and tired of these guys. Like sometimes it is really hurtful to listen to people like this, just making claims, territorial claims, that we have to somehow now give up on our territory, our country, our nation to some Genesis, which was written thousands of years ago. Like, what if I come personally to you now in Europe and I say my religion says that your home is mine? Like, would you give your home to me? What kind of ridiculous argument is this? Like, we're living in the 21st century. You have international law. We have the UN, and he's talking about God promised this land to certain people. I don't know. It looks, for me, it sounds ridiculous. I don't know what it sounds to you, but I think also the re-emergence of ISIS in Syria is not a coincidence. And this could be instrumentalized, and it could be weaponized, and it could be used. And if I'm saying this is for an argument's sake and just for the record, maybe it happens in the future. I have to say it. So if it happens, so we know that there were indications. That's why we said this. For an argument's sake, if ISIS re-emerges and poses a threat against the Jolani regime, remember when Jolani has taken over power, probably there were forces in Israel celebrating, because they thought that if this jihadi group comes to power, then they can paint the entire Syria as a terrorist entity and they could occupy whatever they like in Syria. And then Jolani just took the advice of Turkey and started basically licking the ass of Donald Trump. And he went to the White House and he basically gave Donald Trump everything, right? in order to protect himself. But so he took off his jihadi costume. He said he no longer wants to carry on the transnational jihadism, but rather he's only domestic rebel. So all these things probably didn't play in favor of Israel, because Israelis wanted for him to become to continue as a transnational jihadist, because that would be a perfect excuse for them to expand inside Syria, right? But now, with the re-emergence of ISIS, which is a transnational jihadi group, this argument could come back on the table, and now the Israelis could say the ISIS is expanding and they're coming to Damascus, and we have to protect our national security. And then the next thing you would see is Israel basically occupying Damascus. This is just a conspiracy theory. You don't have to believe it, but it could happen. So everything today could be called a conspiracy theory, and then few months later, you could see it as a fact, right? So guys, thank you so much for tuning into today's stream. Please don't leave this stream before liking and thumbs up of this video. It will reach to a lot of more people if you do that. I would really appreciate it if you do it, and also subscribe to Syriana Analysis YouTube channel. And if you like to do more, go one step further and support the independent work I'm doing here by myself from A to Z. Everything is myself. You can become a patron, guys. The link is scrolling on the screen, patreon.com/Syriana Analysis. If you don't like to use Patreon, there are different other means in the description below, or you can go to the first pinned comment under this stream and you will see all the ways you can support this independent work. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's stream, whether on YouTube or on Rumble, guys, and I will see you tomorrow. Salam.